The dull gray of the diplomatic compound walls seemed to mirror Sergeant Kale Vance's mood as he completed his third perimeter sweep of the morning. 6 months into his deployment on Cerulean Prime, and the novelty of serving on an alien world had long since faded into tedium. As a seasoned veteran of the Earth Defense Space Force, Kale had expected something more challenging than glorified guard duty at the edges of human space. Cerulean Prime was objectively beautiful, with its triple moons hanging like pearl drops in a lavender sky, and architecture that seemed to grow rather than be built, organic structures that pulsed with bioluminescence as night fell. The air was thick with the scent of exotic flowers, and a slightly lower gravity gave each step a dreamlike quality. But beauty couldn't mask Kale's growing sense of isolation. "Vance, Northeast Quadrant check-in," crackled his comm unit. "All clear," he responded mechanically, eyes scanning the perimeter fence where human technology met the flowing, almost liquid metal barriers preferred by the Ceruleans. "Nothing but those weird pink birds again." "Roger that." "Maintain position." Kale sighed and adjusted his pulse rifle, a weapon he'd thankfully never had to use here. The diplomatic mission was supposedly strengthening ties between Earth and the matriarchal Cerulean society, a species whose advanced biotech could revolutionize human medicine. But from Kale's vantage point, progress seemed glacial, wrapped in layer upon layer of ceremonial protocol. The silent Cerulean guards who occasionally crossed his path didn't help. They towered over him by at least 2 feet, their iridescent skin shifting colors slightly as they moved, 4-finger hands resting on weapons that resembled curved shells more than guns. They never spoke to him, only acknowledging his presence with brief nods that somehow managed to convey both courtesy and distance. 3 more months, Kale reminded himself. 3 more months until rotation back to Earth, where gravity felt right and the sky was the proper color of blue, where he could drink real coffee instead of the synthesized approximation the compound dispensers produced, where conversations didn't require translator devices and people didn't look at him as if he were some primitive curiosity. His thoughts were interrupted by the distant sound of ceremonial horns. The royal procession would be passing through the compound's central plaza soon. Though not part of the security detail for the event, Kale's position afforded him a glimpse of the pageantry as Queen Zalara made her weekly journey to the Temple of Ancestors. He'd only seen her twice before, but both times her presence had been undeniable. Curiosity getting the better of him, Kale positioned himself where the perimeter path offered a view of the plaza. The procession emerged from the inner palace grounds, a flowing river of Ceruleans in elaborate garments that seemed to shimmer with their own light. At its center walked Queen Zalara, her height impressive even among her tall species, her bearing regal and untouchable. Her skin glowed with a silvery blue luminescence that marked the royal bloodline, and the ornate headdress she wore curved upward like the crest of a wave frozen in time. Beside her, much smaller, but carrying herself with similar dignity, was Princess Lyriel. The child, perhaps equivalent to an 8-year-old human, Kale guessed, moved with careful precision, as if every step had been rehearsed. Her skin had the same silvery blue glow as her mother's, though softer, still developing. Unlike the queen's composed features, the princess occasionally glanced around with unmistakable curiosity, only to be gently guided back to formal posture by attendants. For a brief moment, as the procession passed the section closest to Kale's position, the princess's gaze wandered in his direction. Their eyes met, hers large and multifaceted like polished opals, and Kale saw a flash of interest before an attendant whispered something that brought her attention forward again. "Poor kid," Kale muttered to himself. "All ceremony, no childhood." He returned to his patrol route, pushing away the unexpected empathy. It wasn't his place to have opinions about royal Cerulean child-rearing. He was just a soldier doing his job, counting days until he could go home. The first explosion hit without warning. The ground beneath Kale's feet shuddered, and a section of wall 30 meters ahead erupted in a shower of debris and strange glowing particles. Training kicked in instantly. He dropped to a defensive position, rifle ready, eyes scanning for the source of the attack. All units, we have multiple breaches in sectors 3, 7, and 9. His commander's voice cut through the sudden chaos on the comm channel. Unknown hostiles entering the compound. Protect the diplomats and retreat to secure points. A second explosion tore through a nearby communication tower, sending it crashing down across Kale's patrol route. The air filled with a high-pitched wail, the Cerulean alarm system engaging, followed by the deeper, pulsing alert from the human security systems. "This is Vance," he shouted into his comm. "Northeast quadrant compromised. Request instructions and backup." Static answered him. Either communications were being jammed or the central system had taken damage. Kale caught movement at the newly formed breach. Figures rushing through, their forms obscured by some kind of reflective armor that made them difficult to focus on. They weren't wearing standard Cerulean Guard uniforms, but they moved with the same fluid grace of the species. An internal faction? A coup attempt? He had no time to speculate. A burst of energy fire cut through the air where he'd been standing seconds before. Kale rolled behind a decorative stone planter and returned fire, his pulse rifle striking one of the attackers and sending them sprawling. More explosions rocked the compound. Through gaps in the chaos, Kale could see fighting spreading across the plaza where the royal procession had been. The disciplined Cerulean royal guards had formed a protective circle, but they were under heavy assault from multiple directions. With his position about to be overrun and communications down, Kale made a tactical decision. He needed to get to the human embassy section within the compound. That would be the fallback position for EDSF personnel. Staying low, he began moving away from the breach, using the ornamental garden features for cover. The compound was transforming into a war zone. The beautiful living architecture that had seemed so peaceful now revealed defensive capabilities. Walls thickened and hardened, some sections extending sharp, thorn-like protrusions. The Ceruleans had built their diplomatic compound with the possibility of attack in mind. Kale navigated through service corridors and less-traveled paths, avoiding the main areas where fighting seemed most intense. Twice he encountered groups of attackers and was forced to engage or hide. His combat training served him well, but he was under no illusions. This was a coordinated assault with superior numbers. His priority had to be reaching his unit. Turning a corner into what should have been a maintenance passage, he found himself instead in one of the small meditation gardens that dotted the compound. This one had sustained damage. Part of the ceiling had collapsed, crushing the delicate plant formations and blocking the main exit. And there, half concealed behind a fallen decorative column, was a small figure in torn ceremonial garments. Princess Lyriel, the young Cerulean royal, was curled into herself, trembling visibly. A thin trickle of luminescent blue, Cerulean blood, ran from a cut on her forehead, and her elaborate garments were torn and soiled. When she sensed Kale's presence, her head snapped up, multifaceted eyes wide with terror. For a moment, neither moved. Then Lyriel shrank further back, a small sound of fear escaping her. "It's okay," Kale said automatically, lowering his rifle slightly. "I'm Sergeant Vance, Earth Defense Forces. I'm not going to hurt you." The princess didn't respond. Of course, she probably didn't have a personal translator. Most Cerulean royalty relied on attendants for communication with humans. Kale tapped his chest. "Friend," he said, then pointed to his EDSF insignia. "Here to help." Understanding flickered in her eyes, followed immediately by suspicion. She said something in a musical Cerulean language, her tone questioning and frightened. A fresh explosion somewhere nearby made them both flinch. Kale could hear shouting, some in human languages, some in Cerulean dialects. The fighting was getting closer. He faced an impossible choice. Protocol was clear. In case of attack, EDSF personnel were to secure human diplomatic staff and retreat to designated safe zones. Getting involved in Cerulean internal affairs, especially with royalty, could create interspecies incidents that might last decades. But she was a child, alone and terrified. A memory flashed through his mind. His sister's daughter back on Earth, the same trusting smile she'd given him the last time he'd visited, before she asked when he was coming home again. He'd promised to teach her how to fish when he returned. Damn the regulations, Kale muttered, then approached Lyriel slowly, hands visible. He knelt to appear less threatening, pointed to himself and then to her, and made a protective gesture. "I'll keep you safe," he said, knowing she wouldn't understand the words, but hoping his intent was clear. Lyriel hesitated, then spoke again. This time, she pointed toward where Kale knew the central plaza was located, making a flowing gesture with her hands that somehow conveyed elegant authority. She was asking about her mother, the queen. Kale shook his head gently. "I don't know," he said truthfully, "but we can't. Stay here." Another explosion, closer this time. Decision made, Kale approached Lyriel, moving slowly but with purpose. When he reached for her, she initially recoiled, but then allowed him to check her injury. The cut wasn't deep, but Cerulean physiology wasn't his expertise. At least she could move. He offered his hand. After a long moment of evaluation, the princess took it, her 4 slender fingers wrapping around his 5 with surprising strength. "Let's go," Kale said, and led her away from the sounds of fighting. Their progress through the compound was slow and tense. Twice they had to hide in recessed doorways as groups of attackers passed. Once they were forced to backtrack when they encountered a collapsed section of corridor, flames dancing across the strange, almost sentient building material. The compound's automated defense systems had activated, but without central control, they were as much a hazard as a help. Kale was nearly hit by a security drone that identified him as an unauthorized presence in a restricted area. Only his combat reflexes saved them both as he pulled Lyriel behind a structural column, just as the drone fired. "This place has gone to hell," he muttered, checking the charge on his rifle. "Half power remaining. Not great." Lyriel tugged at his sleeve, then pointed down a narrow passageway he wouldn't have noticed. A service tunnel, perhaps, or one of the many ceremonial paths that seemed to wind through the compound like a maze. Her expression was insistent. Kale hesitated, then nodded. She knew the compound better than he did, and his planned route to the human section was clearly compromised. The passage she led him through narrowed until he had to stoop, the ceiling designed for Cerulean children rather than adult humans. The walls here had the same organic quality as the rest of the compound, but seemed older somehow, the bioluminescence dimmer, pulsing in slow, steady rhythms. They emerged into a small chamber that Kale guessed might be some kind of teaching space for royal children. Shelves held objects that resembled both toys and educational tools, complex puzzles, models of what might be Cerulean astronomical systems, and containers of shifting, colorful substances. Lyriel moved to a wall and pressed her palm against it. A section slid open, revealing a shallow alcove containing what looked like emergency supplies, light sources, containers of water, and what Kale recognized as Cerulean emergency rations. "Smart thinking," he said with genuine approval. The princess might be young, but she'd been trained for crisis situations. Of course, being royalty on any world came with inherent dangers. The relative safety of their hideaway gave Kale a chance to assess their situation. His comm unit remained useless, producing only static even after he adjusted to different EDSF emergency frequencies. Either jamming was in effect, or the communication infrastructure had been seriously damaged. He checked his rifle and remaining equipment. Half-charged weapon, personal med kit, emergency beacon, useless inside the compound shielding, and a single light source. Not much to work with. At least Lyriel's knowledge of the compound gave them an advantage. The princess was examining him with undisguised curiosity now that immediate danger had passed. She gestured to his rifle, then to herself, saying something in her language. Kale shook his head, guessing her meaning. "Not for you to use. Too dangerous." He mimicked recoil and shook his head again. Lyriel made a sound that might have been exasperation, then pointed to the rifle, to herself, and made a different gesture, fingers spreading outward from her temple. Recognition dawned. "You want to know if I'm here to protect you?" Kale asked, then nodded firmly. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm doing." The princess seemed satisfied with this answer. She settled on the floor, arranging her torn formal garments as best she could, and pulled something from a hidden pocket, a small, crystalline object that caught the dim light and reflected it in complex patterns. Kale kept watch at the hidden door, occasionally glancing back at his unexpected charge. The princess was turning the crystal in her hands, her expression somber beyond her years. When she noticed him watching, she held the object out toward him. After a moment's hesitation, Kale accepted it. The crystal was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse slightly against his palm. Its surface was etched with intricate patterns that shifted as he turned it, somehow conveying impressions rather than images. Family, protection, history. "This is important to you," he said softly. Lyriel nodded, then touched her chest where a human heart would be, and pointed to the crystal. "A family heirloom?" Kale guessed. "Or something sacred?" The princess tapped her chest again, then made a flowing gesture Kale had seen used in reference to the queen. "It connects you to your mother," he translated, earning another nod. He handed the crystal back carefully. "We'll find her," he promised, though he had no idea how he would fulfill such a promise in the middle of what appeared to be a coup attempt or invasion. Lyriel accepted the crystal and tucked it away, then approached one of the shelves. She selected what appeared to be a simple drawing implement and a sheet of material that resembled parchment but had a subtle glow. Quickly, with surprising skill, she sketched a rough map of what Kale recognized as the compound. She indicated their current location, then marked several paths through the complex. One led to the central plaza, throne room, or audience chamber, Kale guessed. Another to what must be the royal residential area. A third to a location Kale didn't recognize, marked with a symbol that resembled interlocking circles. The princess pointed emphatically at this third location, then to herself and Kale. "You think that's where we should go?" he asked. She nodded firmly. "And what's there? Safety? Your mother?" Lyriel made the flowing gesture again that seemed to represent the queen, followed by a motion that suggested protection or strength. Kale studied the crew map. The path would take them further from the human embassy section where his duty required him to report. But the compound was in chaos, and his primary objective now was keeping the princess safe. If she believed this location offered protection, it was their best option. "Lead the way," he agreed, gesturing toward the hidden passage. They had been resting for perhaps 2 hours when distant sounds of fighting prompted them to move on. Lyriel guided them through a network of passages that Kale suspected were emergency routes known only to the royal family and their closest protectors. Some were so old they appeared to have been forgotten, dust covering the floor, except for what might have been the recent tracks of small feet. Had the princess used these passages before, perhaps as escape routes from her formal duties? The paths took them deeper into the compound, away from the perimeter where Kale had been stationed. The architecture changed subtly, older, more intricate, with biological elements that seemed more pronounced. Vein-like structures pulsed along the walls, and occasionally they passed chambers filled with strange plants that seemed to watch them pass. Lyriel moved with growing confidence, occasionally stopping to listen or to place her hand against a wall, as if communing with the building itself. Kale followed, alert for threats, but increasingly fascinated by this glimpse into Cerulean royal life that few humans had ever seen. They paused at an intersection of corridors, and Lyriel suddenly froze, head tilted in a listening posture. Kale heard nothing, but trusted her superior senses. They pressed into an alcove just as a patrol of attackers passed through a larger corridor nearby. Close enough that Kale could now see their armor-bore insignia he didn't recognize, neither standard Cerulean military nor any off-world faction he knew of. When they had passed, Lyriel tugged at his sleeve and pointed to a different route than she'd originally indicated. She made urgent gestures that Kale interpreted as a warning that their planned path might be compromised. "New plan," he whispered. "I trust you." The princess led them through increasingly narrow passages until they reached what appeared to be a dead end. Lyriel approached the wall confidently, placed both hands against it in a specific pattern, and whispered something in her language. The wall rippled like water and parted, revealing a small chamber beyond. Inside was a communication station unlike any Kale had seen in the human sections of the compound. Instead of screens and keyboards, it featured crystalline growths arranged in patterns around a central pool of luminescent liquid. Lyriel approached it without hesitation, placing her hand into the pool. The liquid climbed her arm without wetting it, forming patterns that glowed more intensely as they moved. She looked at Kale and gestured for him to wait, then closed her eyes in concentration. The crystals around the pool began to pulse in complex rhythms, and the liquid around her arm formed symbols that shifted and changed. Kale realized she was sending a message, using some form of Cerulean biotechnology that responded to her royal genetic signature. Who she was contacting, he couldn't guess, but he maintained his guard position by the entrance, watching for threats. After several minutes, Lyriel withdrew her hand. The liquid fell back into the pool, but one small portion separated and formed a hovering sphere that projected an image into the air between them. A map of the compound with moving lights that Kale understood represented individuals or groups. Most were concentrated around the central plaza and royal quarters. Several appeared to be converging on a location not far from where they currently stood. Lyriel pointed to one particular light, making the flowing queen gesture again, then to several lights moving in formation around it. She then pointed to their current location and made a gesture bringing her hands together. "Your mother is there, and she's coming to meet us here?" Kale interpreted. The princess nodded, her expression showing relief for the first time since he'd found her. "How long?" Lyriel held up 3 fingers, then pointed to a timepiece-like object on the wall that was slowly cycling through colors. 3 cycles of that thing. "Got it." Kale checked his rifle again, surveying the small chamber. "This place secure?" The princess touched the wall, and sections of it thickened visibly, the organic material growing denser. She nodded confidently. "Good job," Kale said with genuine admiration. "You're pretty resourceful for someone your age." Lyriel didn't understand his words, but she seemed to grasp his tone. For the first time, she offered what might have been a small smile, a slight upturning of her mouth and a brightening of her multifaceted eyes. They settled in to wait, Kale taking the opportunity to check the princess's head wound, which was already healing with remarkable speed. Cerulean biology was impressive, another reason Earth was so interested in diplomatic relations. As they waited, Lyriel retrieved her crystal again, holding it tightly as if drawing comfort from its presence. After a moment of hesitation, she held it out to Kale again, but this time with a questioning gesture. Kale accepted it carefully. "What is it you want me to understand?" The princess placed her fingertips lightly on his hand holding the crystal, then closed her eyes. A sensation flowed through Kale, not quite thoughts or images, but impressions, a sense of ancient lineage, of power passed from mother to daughter for generations, of responsibility and connection to the Cerulean people. He understood suddenly that this wasn't merely a keepsake, but some kind of royal token, perhaps even a backup key to Cerulean systems. Lyriel had trusted him with something of immense value, showing him that she considered him not just a protector, but an ally. "I'm honored," Kale said softly, returning the crystal. "I won't let you down." The waiting was tense, but uneventful. Twice the projected map showed patrols of what Kale assumed were hostiles passing near their location, but none approached the hidden chamber. The timepiece completed its color cycle 3 times, and as the final color faded, a subtle vibration ran through the walls. Lyriel stood immediately, her posture changing from tired child to royal princess in an instant. She touched the wall, and the entrance they had used earlier rippled open once more. For Cerulean royal guards entered first, their shell-like weapons ready. They assessed Kale with sharp, professional gazes, but made no hostile moves when Lyriel stepped forward and spoke rapidly in their language. Behind them came Queen Zalara. Even in battle conditions, with her ceremonial robes exchanged for what appeared to be form-fitting armor and her elegant headdress absent, she carried an undeniable authority. Her height and the intensity of her bioluminescence made her presence fill the small chamber. Her resemblance to her daughter was clear, but where Lyriel's features held childhood softness, the queen's were sharp, regal, and currently hard with the strain of command during crisis. Lyriel rushed to her mother, all royal composure forgotten as she embraced her. The queen's stern expression softened momentarily as she placed a hand on her daughter's head, the gesture somehow conveying both deep relief and restrained affection. Then Zalara's gaze fixed on Kale, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. She spoke, her voice carrying musical undertones that the Cerulean language always possessed, but with an edge like crystalline blades. One of the guards stepped forward, activated a translator device, and addressed Kale. Her Majesty demands to know who you are and why you are with the Crown Princess. Kale straightened to attention. Sergeant Kalen Vance, Earth Defense Space Force, Northeast Perimeter Security Detail. I found Princess Lyriel separated from her escorts during the initial attack. With communications down and hostile forces throughout the compound, I made the decision to escort her to safety until she could be reunited with your forces. The guard translated. Queen Zalara's expression remained unreadable as she listened. Her eyes, larger and more complex than human eyes, with facets that caught light like opals, never leaving Kale's face. She responded, her tone questioning and slightly accusatory. Her Majesty asks why an Earth soldier would risk himself for a Cerulean royal when your standing orders are to protect your own diplomatic personnel. Kale met the Queen's gaze steadily. With respect, Your Majesty, she's a child. Where I come from, protecting children isn't a matter of diplomatic protocol. It's basic decency. After translation, the Queen's expression shifted subtly. She spoke again, this time with a different cadence. The Queen acknowledges that you violated your military protocols by not returning to your command. This could be interpreted as desertion or even as kidnapping a royal heir. What defense do you offer? Kale's jaw tightened. I made a tactical decision based on immediate circumstances. The princess was in danger and alone. I put her safety above protocol. If that's considered a crime by EDSF or by Cerulean law, then I accept the consequences. I wouldn't have acted differently. As this was translated, Lyriel stepped forward and spoke urgently to her mother, gesturing to Kale and then displaying the crystal she had shown him earlier. The Queen's eyes widened slightly at this, and she addressed her daughter in what seemed like a questioning tone. Their exchange continued for several moments, with Lyriel speaking with surprising authority for her age, occasionally gesturing to the map they had used or to Kale's weapon. The Queen listened with growing attention, occasionally glancing at Kale with reassessment in her gaze. Finally, she turned to address him directly again through the translator. The princess informs me that you not only protected her, but respected her guidance through the compound, treated her with dignity rather than as a burden, and honored the significance of the ancestral crystal when she revealed it to you. These are not actions our people have come to expect from humans, who often seem indifferent to our ways. Kale shifted uncomfortably. I'm just a soldier, Your Majesty. I don't know much about diplomacy or cultural exchange. I just know that your daughter is brave, smart, and deserved to be treated with respect. She got us both to safety when I didn't know the way. After translation, something almost like surprise flickered across the Queen's features. She spoke again, her tone marginally warmer. The attack on our compound was orchestrated by the Crimson Separation, a faction that opposes our alliance with Earth and other off-world species. They specifically targeted the royal family, believing that eliminating us would allow them to install a government hostile to continued diplomatic relations. Had they captured my daughter, they would have used her as leverage that might have forced concessions or worse. Kale nodded grimly. I figure it was something like that. Is the situation contained? It is being resolved. The majority of their forces have been neutralized or have retreated. The compound's primary systems are being restored. The Queen paused, studying him. Your commanding officers believe you were killed in the initial attack. Your biosignature disappeared from their tracking systems. The princess led us through shielded passages, Kale explained. It probably blocked the signal. Queen Zalara conferred briefly with her guards, then addressed Kale again. You will be escorted to your embassy section once we have completed secure passage. Before that, however, there's the matter of your actions to address formally. Kale straightened, bracing himself. Interspecies incidents could end careers, or worse, if Cerulean justice was as alien as their architecture. Sergeant Kalen Vance of Earth, the translator conveyed, the formal address making the hairs on Kale's neck stand up. You acted outside your assigned duties, violated chain of command, and involved yourself in Cerulean royal security matters without authorization. Yes, Your Majesty, Kale acknowledged, keeping his voice steady. However, the Queen continued, her own voice taking on a formal, almost ritual quality that the translator struggled to convey. You did so to protect the Crown Princess, heir to the Cerulean ancestral throne, at risk to your own life and standing. You returned her safely and with her royal dignity intact. Lyriel stepped forward again, saying something in a formal tone that seemed to be part of the ritual exchange. She held out the crystal again, this time toward her mother. The Queen accepted it, then held it between her palms for a moment. When she opened her hands, the crystal had changed color slightly, now pulsing with a rhythm that somehow matched the cadence of Kale's heartbeat. Among our people, the Queen explained, actions speak more truly than treaties or words. Your deed has shown a character that merits recognition beyond what your own people might offer. One of the guards approached bearing what appeared to be a small, living container, a shell-like structure that opened at the Queen's touch to reveal a tiny, glowing organism, similar to the bioluminescent elements of the compound, but concentrated into a single, bright point. This is a guardian spark, the translator explained as the Queen lifted it carefully. It is a living embodiment of the protection you offered to the royal bloodline. Normally, such gifts are reserved for those who have served the throne for generations. Kale remained silent, sensing the gravity of the moment. If you accept this gift, the Queen continued, it creates a bond recognized by all Ceruleans. You would become Vathiler Solii, bearer of the Dawnlight, an ancient title given to those who have protected royal blood in times of darkness. It would grant you certain privileges within our territories and mark you as a trusted friend of the throne. Kale blinked in surprise. That's a significant honor, Your Majesty. I'm not sure I understand all its implications. The Queen's expression softened fractionally. The spark creates a subtle link between bearer and bestower. It is partly biological, partly what you might call spiritual. You would carry with you an awareness of the royal family's well-being, particularly Princess Lyriel, whom you protected. In turn, we would sense your general state and location within our territories. Not your thoughts, but your presence and welfare. A mutual protection pact, Kale translated, earning a nod from the Queen. In practical terms, she continued, you would have access to Cerulean territories normally closed to off-worlders. Your words would carry weight in our councils. Should you ever require aid from our people, the spark would ensure it was granted. Lyriel stepped forward, looking up at Kale with an expression that transcended language barriers, hopeful and solemn at once. Kale considered for a long moment. Such a connection went far beyond his role as a simple EDSF sergeant. It would complicate his return to normal duty, possibly even his eventual return to Earth. Yet he couldn't deny the significance of the gesture or the genuine bond he had formed with the young princess during their shared crisis. I would be honored to accept, Your Majesty, he said finally, bowing his head slightly. The Queen approached and placed the guardian spark against Kale's chest, just above his heart. The tiny organism pulsed once, brightly, then seemed to dissolve into his skin, leaving behind a faint, luminescent mark that resembled a stylized sunrise. A warm sensation spread through Kale's body, settling into a background awareness. A sense of connection to something larger than himself, centered particularly on the small princess who watched the ceremony with solemn approval. It is done, Queen Zalara declared. Sergeant Kalen Vance of Earth is now Vathiler Solii, bearer of the Dawnlight, friend of the Cerulean throne. The formal ceremony concluded, but before Kale was escorted to the human embassy section, Lyriel approached him once more. She held out a small object, not the royal crystal this time, but a simpler item that resembled a polished stone with swirling patterns inside. The queen observed this exchange with interest, but did not interfere. A remembrance token, the translator explained. A personal gift, apart from the formal honor. Kale accepted it with a small bow to the princess. "Thank you," he said directly to her. "It was an honor to be your protector." Lyriel seemed to understand his sentiment, if not his exact words. She performed a small, formal gesture, a circular motion with her hand over her heart, then surprised everyone present by adding a very human gesture. She extended her hand to shake, clearly something she had observed in diplomatic ceremonies. Kale shook her hand gently, noting how her 4 fingers wrapped around his 5 in a symbol of their different worlds, finding unexpected connection. 2 weeks later, the diplomatic compound had been largely repaired, its living architecture already healing the scars of battle. The attack by the Crimson Separation had been decisively put down, with the faction's leadership captured or scattered. Security had been enhanced, with joint human-Cerulean protocols implemented, one positive outcome of the crisis. Kale stood on a balcony overlooking the central plaza, watching as Princess Lyriel participated in a ceremonial garden planting. His new status as Vathiler Solii had raised eyebrows among both EDSF Command and the Human Diplomatic Corps, but after the initial shock, they had recognized the unprecedented opportunity it presented for deeper cultural exchange. Instead of counting days until his return to Earth, Kale now found himself appointed as a special liaison between EDSF and the Cerulean Royal Guard, a position created specifically to accommodate his unusual status. He was no longer a perimeter guard, but a bridge between worlds. The guardian spark beneath his skin pulsed gently, attuned to Lyriel's presence nearby. Through it, he could sense her general well-being, currently content and focused on her ceremonial duties. It wasn't mind reading or even emotion sensing exactly, but more like an awareness of her state of being, as one might sense sunshine on skin without. Looking at the sky, contemplating your new role, Sergeant Vance, came a voice behind him. Kale turned to find Ambassador Elaine Huxley, Earth's chief diplomatic representative, joining him at the balcony rail. "Still getting used to it, ma'am," he admitted. "A month ago, I was counting days until rotation home. Now you've become integral to the most significant cultural exchange humanity has ever established with the Ceruleans," she completed. "The Queen's gift isn't just a personal honor. It's a diplomatic breakthrough. The Ceruleans have always kept humans at arm's length, particularly regarding their biotechnology. Your connection to the royal family has opened doors we've been trying to unlock for decades." Kale touched a faint mark on his chest. "It wasn't exactly planned diplomacy on my part. I just couldn't leave her there. Sometimes the most profound connections come from simple human decency," the ambassador said. "The Ceruleans have been studying our treaties and political maneuvers for years, but what finally broke through was one soldier seeing a child in danger and acting out of compassion. Below them, Lyriel completed her part in the ceremony, planting a seedling that glowed with soft bioluminescence. As if sensing Kale's attention, she glanced up toward the balcony and made a small, subtle gesture. The circular motion over her heart that he now understood was a sign of respect and connection. "She's quite remarkable," Kale said. "During the attack, she never panicked. She knew secret passages, emergency protocols, how to use royal communication systems. All that training, but she's still just a kid underneath it all. Royal children rarely get to be simply children," Ambassador Huxley observed, "especially in a matrilineal society like the Ceruleans, where Lyriel isn't just a princess, but the future ruler of their entire civilization." Kale nodded thoughtfully. "The Queen told me yesterday that Lyriel has asked to include human history and customs in her education. Apparently, she's particularly interested in Earth's military structures and how they differ from Cerulean defense methodologies." The ambassador raised an eyebrow. "The Queen spoke with you directly?" "Without the full diplomatic entourage. A side effect of the Guardian Spark," Kale explained. "It creates a different kind of relationship, less formal in some ways, though she's still very much the Queen." Fascinating. You realize your mission reports are being studied by xenocultural specialists across Earth's academic institutions. The ambassador's tone was light, but her expression serious. What you're experiencing is unprecedented. Kale shifted uncomfortably. I'm still just a soldier, ma'am. Not anymore, Sergeant Vance, she corrected gently. You're a cultural bridge. And speaking of which, she consulted her comm device. You're expected at the Ancestral Library in 20 minutes. The Queen has granted you access as part of your Vathialar privileges. Kale straightened in surprise. The Ancestral Library? I thought that was restricted to royal family and high priesthood. It was. Until you. The ambassador smiled. Don't be late. The Ancestral Library defied human architectural understanding. From the outside, it appeared to be a modest structure adjacent to the royal compound's central temple. Inside, it expanded into impossible spaces, chambers that seemed larger than their exterior should allow, connected by spiraling passages that shifted subtly as one walked through them. The walls themselves were alive, not merely in the way all Cerulean architecture incorporated biological elements, but actively responsive. They pulsed with information, patterns of light flowing like liquid data across surfaces that were neither fully solid nor fully organic. Kale was met at the entrance by an elder Cerulean who introduced herself as Keeper Thalion. Her skin had faded to a pale lavender with age, and the bioluminescent patterns that marked all Ceruleans were particularly complex across her elongated features. Bearer of the dawn light, she greeted him, using his ceremonial title. You are the first human to cross this threshold in the 8,000 cycles of this library's existence. I'm honored, Kale replied, trying not to show his nervousness. Though I'm not sure I understand why I've been granted this privilege. Thalion's multifaceted eyes studied him with ancient wisdom. The gift of the spark is not given lightly. It has created connections that must be contextualized. Come. She led him through corridors that seemed to bend according to laws of physics Kale couldn't comprehend. They passed chambers where Cerulean scholars worked with interfaces that resembled pools of light more than computers, their four-fingered hands drawing complex patterns that manipulated data somehow stored within the very structure of the building. Finally, they reached a circular chamber deep within the library. At its center stood a column of what appeared to be water, yet it flowed upward rather than down, containing within it suspended objects that Kale recognized as similar to the crystal Lyriel had shown him. The ancestral column, Thalion explained. A repository of royal lineage and memory. Each crystal contains the essence, what you might call recorded consciousness, of previous queens. Kale stared in amazement. They're stored consciousnesses? Like a computer backup? That analogy is insufficient but not entirely incorrect, the keeper replied. When a queen reaches the end of her natural life, her experiential wisdom is transferred into a crystal, allowing future generations to consult her directly. It is not the complete being, but the core of her knowledge and perspective. And this relates to the Guardian Spark how? Kale asked, his hand unconsciously moving to the mark on his chest. Thalion gestured, and the liquid column shifted, bringing forward a crystal that pulsed with the same rhythm Kale could feel from his spark. The spark within you is connected to the royal lineage through Princess Lyriel. It has granted you a place within our history, not as a Cerulean, but as one connected to our future queen. You are now part of what we call the sentient record. The implications slowly dawned on Kale. You mean, when I die, a portion of your experiences, particularly those relevant to the protection and understanding of the royal line, would be preserved, Thalion confirmed. Not your complete consciousness, but an echo that future generations might consult. Kale felt slightly dizzy at the concept. I'm a soldier, not a diplomat or scholar. I'm not sure my experiences would be worth preserving. Thalion made a gesture that Kale had come to recognize as the Cerulean equivalent of gentle disagreement. It was precisely your soldier's perspective and actions that created this bond. Your directness, your protective instinct uncomplicated by political calculation. These are valuable perspectives our royal line wishes to preserve. She guided him to a section of the wall that responded to her touch, revealing historical records projected as three-dimensional scenes, moments from Cerulean history playing out in miniature. Our species has been challenged by isolation, she explained. We advanced quickly in biological and architectural technologies, but remained insular, suspicious of outside perspectives. Some, like the Crimson Separation, wish to maintain that isolation permanently. Queen Zalara believes this would lead to stagnation. One of the projected scenes showed what appeared to be an ancient battlefield, Ceruleans fighting against a species Kale didn't recognize. The last time we opened ourselves to outside influence was 7,000 cycles ago, Thalion continued. It ended in betrayal and war. Since then, caution has defined our approach to other species. Until now, Kale surmised. Until a human soldier placed the welfare of a Cerulean child above his orders and safety, she confirmed. Such individual bonds, forged in crisis, sometimes reshape wider relations between peoples. Over the following weeks, Kale's role evolved far beyond his original EDSF assignment. The Guardian Spark granted him access to Cerulean cultural spaces normally closed to humans, while his military background gave him a unique perspective on the security arrangements being rebuilt after the attack. Princess Lyriel had begun including regular meetings with Kale in her schedule, initially presented as cultural exchange lessons to satisfy protocol, but evolving into something more genuine. With the help of improved translator technology, they compared experiences of growing up on their respective worlds. Kale shared stories of fishing with his father in Minnesota lakes, while Lyriel described the ceremonial swimming of lights that young Cerulean nobles performed during seasonal transitions. Despite the vast differences in their backgrounds, he a career soldier from a middle-class Earth family, she the heir to an ancient alien throne, they discovered surprising commonalities. Both understood duty and expectations. Both knew what it meant to follow strict protocols while harboring private doubts. Both valued direct action over political maneuvering. "Do you miss Earth?" Lyriel asked during one of their meetings in the small royal garden, where she was permitted less formal interaction. Kale considered the question carefully. 3 months ago, he had been counting days until rotation home. "Now, I miss certain things," he admitted. "The smell of pine forests, the weight of Earth gravity, real coffee." He smiled. "But I find myself thinking of Earth less often than I expected." Lyriel nodded thoughtfully, her opalescent eyes reflecting the garden's bioluminescence. "Mother says the spark changes perspectives. It creates belonging where there was none before." "Your mother has discussed this with you?" Kale asked, surprised that the queen would address such matters with her young daughter. "I am heir to the ancestral throne," Lyriel replied with a dignity that occasionally emerged, reminding Kale of her royal status despite her youth. "I must understand all aspects of rule, including the significance of naming a non-Cerulean as Vath-Ealer." "And what do you think of that decision?" Kale asked cautiously. The princess studied him with unexpected intensity. "I think it was correct. You acted as a true guardian should, without calculation or expectation of reward." Her formal tone softened slightly. "And you did not treat me only as a princess to be protected, but as a person to be respected." The guardian spark warmed briefly against Kale's chest, responding, he had learned, to meaningful exchanges between himself and the royal family. It was as if the living gift approved of this moment of understanding. "Well," he said, slightly embarrassed by her earnest assessment, "you earned that respect. Not many children, human or Cerulean, would have handled that situation with your courage." Lyriel made the circular gesture over her heart. A motion Kale had come to understand conveyed both gratitude and connection. Then, with the swift mood changes characteristic of the young, she shifted to more practical matters. "I have been permitted to observe the joint security drills next cycle," she said, excitement breaking through her royal composure. "Will you be participating?" "I'll be helping coordinate," Kale confirmed. "Your mother thought having someone connected to both military traditions would help identify potential misunderstandings." "Excellent. I shall observe with particular attention," Lyriel declared formally, though her eyes sparkled with anticipation. The joint security drills marked the first large-scale cooperation between EDSF personnel and the Cerulean Royal Guard. In the wake of the Crimson Separations attack, both sides had recognized the need for coordinated response protocols. What might have taken years of diplomatic negotiation had been accelerated by the crisis and by Kale's unique position as a bridge between the two forces. Standing on the review platform beside Ambassador Huxley, Queen Zalara, and other dignitaries, Kale felt the strange duality of his position. He wore his EDSF uniform with its sergeant's insignia, but also bore the visible mark of the Guardian Spark and a small Cerulean emblem that identified him as Vathular Solii. He belonged fully to neither world now, yet had a place in both. Princess Lyriel sat slightly behind her mother, watching the proceedings with careful attention. Occasionally her gaze would find Kale, and he would sense a subtle pulse from the spark, her acknowledgement of their connection. The integration is proceeding more smoothly than we anticipated, Ambassador Huxley murmured as they watched human and Cerulean squads demonstrate a coordinated response to a simulated breach. Having someone who understands both tactical doctrines has been invaluable. There are still adjustments needed, Kale noted professionally. The Cerulean emphasis on defensive positioning doesn't always mesh with EDSF's more mobile approach, but they're finding workable compromises. Queen Zalara, overhearing this exchange, added her own observation. The key has been establishing mutual respect at the individual level. Your example has shown this is possible even across significant biological and cultural differences. The Queen rarely addressed Kale directly in public settings, maintaining the formal distance her position required. That she chose to do so now indicated the importance she placed on this integration. The Guardian Spark helps, Kale acknowledged. It provides a level of trust that would normally take years to build. The spark enhances what is already present, the Queen corrected gently. It cannot create trust where there is no foundation. As the drills concluded, Kale sensed a shift in the spark's pulse, a sudden alertness that he had come to recognize as Lyriel's excitement or urgent attention. Glancing toward the princess, he saw her leaning forward, eyes fixed on something in the distance beyond the training grounds. Following her gaze, Kale noticed movement at the perimeter, unauthorized activity near one of the compound's renovation areas. His military instincts immediately assessed two figures, moving with purpose rather than the casual pace of workers, approaching a security blind spot created by the ongoing repairs. The Guardian Spark flared with warning. Not his own perception, but Lyriel's, somehow sensing danger before conscious analysis could identify it. Security breach, Kale said sharply, interrupting whatever the ambassador had been about to say. Southwest perimeter, near the ancestral garden restoration. The Queen's guards responded instantly, moving to protect their sovereign. One of them activated a communication device, alerting the compound's security forces. "How did you?" the ambassador began, but was cut short as alarms began to sound. The organized conclusion to the security drills transformed instantly into a real response. The joint teams that had been demonstrating coordinated tactics now deployed them in earnest, securing the dignitaries and moving with precision toward the identified threat. Remnants of the separation, Queen Zalara stated with cold certainty. They would see today's cooperation as the ultimate betrayal of Cerulean isolation. The Guardian Spark continued its urgent pulsing, and Kale realized its warning was more specific than general danger. "They're targeting the princess," he said, the knowledge coming to him with inexplicable clarity. "This is an assassination attempt, not a general attack." The Queen's eyes widened slightly, the most surprise she ever showed in public, and she tightened her protective stance near her daughter. "How can you be certain?" "The spark," Kale explained quickly. "It's transmitting Lyriel's perception of threat, and it's focused, specific. Understanding passed between them. The living gift had proven its value beyond ceremonial significance." The Queen issued rapid orders in Cerulean, reorganizing her guards' formation to create additional layers of protection around Lyriel. "We should move to the secure bunker," Ambassador Huxley urged, her diplomatic composure giving way to practical concern. Agreed, Kale said, but not by the primary route. They'll have studied the protocols. He turned to the Queen. The passage Lyriel showed me during the first attack, the one through the old teaching chambers. Is it still accessible? Queen Zalara nodded once, sharply. You remember the way? Yes, Kale confirmed. The path's still clear in his memory despite the complexity of Cerulean architecture. It bypasses the main security corridors where they might expect movement. The Queen made a decision with the swift certainty that marked her rule. You will lead my daughter. I must remain visible to direct the response and draw attention from her movement. Before Kale could protest this division, she added, the spark connects you. There is no one better suited to ensure her safety. It was both a command and an expression of trust that transcended normal protocol. Kale nodded, accepting the responsibility. I'll protect her with my life, Your Majesty. I know, the Queen replied simply. Within moments, a smaller security detachment had been organized, while the main royal guard created a visible protective formation around the Queen and officials. Kale and two trusted Cerulean guards escorted Lyriel through a service entrance and into the maze-like interior of the compound. Like last time, Lyriel said as they moved swiftly through corridors increasingly distant from the public areas, but with better company. Despite the danger, she maintained remarkable composure, moving with purpose and without complaint. You remember the way? Kale asked, impressed by her recall of the complex route. I studied it afterward, she replied matter-of-factly. A future queen must know every passage of her domain, especially those that might save her life. They passed through the abandoned teaching chambers where they had first found sanctuary during the previous attack. Lyriel touched a wall panel, revealing the hidden communication station she had used before. We should inform the security forces of our position, she suggested. Kale nodded approval. Good thinking, but keep the transmission brief and coded. While Lyriel communicated their status through the Cerulean biotech interface, Kale consulted with the guards about their next movement. The spark continued its alert pulsing, though at a reduced intensity now that they had created distance from the immediate threat. Once secure in the hidden chambers deep within the compound, Kale established a defensive position while awaiting updates. The Cerulean guards took external watch points, while he remained with the princess in the central room. You are concerned, Lyriel observed, studying his expression with unsettling perception. Not just about the immediate danger. Kale glanced at her, once again struck by the duality of her nature, a child in physical development, yet with a mindset shaped by royal training and responsibilities beyond her years. I'm concerned about what this means, he admitted. A second attack, so soon after the first, timed during a public demonstration of human Cerulean cooperation. The separation faction is more determined than intelligence suggested. They fear change, Lyriel said simply. Mother says fear of the unknown is the most dangerous political force in any society. Your mother is wise, Kale acknowledged. But understanding the motivation doesn't make the threat less real. The princess was quiet for a moment, then approached the wall and placed her palm against it in a specific pattern. A section slid open, revealing a small alcove containing what appeared to be miniature versions of the Cerulean shell weapons carried by the royal guards. You're armed, Lyriel noted, nodding to Kale's EDSF sidearm. I should be as well. Kale raised an eyebrow in surprise. You're trained to use those? Since I could walk, she confirmed without boasting, selecting one of the weapons with practiced ease. Another requirement of my position. I am not permitted to carry weapons during ceremonial functions, but in secure locations, I am expected to be capable of self-defense. The revelation shifted Kale's tactical assessment. He had been planning to protect Lyriel as a non-combatant, but she was clearly prepared to take a more active role in her own defense if necessary. All right, he acknowledged, but you stay behind me regardless. The spark might have bonded us, but I'm still the soldier here, and your mother entrusted me with your safety. Lyriel made the circular gesture of agreement over her heart. Accepted, but know that I will not be helpless should you require assistance. Their wait was tense, but ultimately uneventful. After approximately an hour, the communication panel activated with a message from the Queen. The attack had been contained. 2 separation agents had been captured attempting to infiltrate the compound with molecular destabilizers capable of bypassing standard security scans. Lyriel's early warning through Kale had allowed security forces to intercept them before they could reach their target. It appears, Queen Zalara said when they were reunited in the secure royal quarters, that the Guardian Spark has proven its value beyond ceremonial significance. Kale, standing at formal attention before the Queen, nodded. The connection allowed me to sense the princess's perception of danger before conscious analysis could identify it. More than that, the Queen corrected. It facilitated a trust between you that allowed for immediate action without the delays of normal protocol. This efficiency of connection was precisely why the ancient practice was established. She studied him with her penetrating gaze, though it was never anticipated that a non-Cerulean would bear the spark. Life has a way of surprising us, Kale offered cautiously, unsure how to respond to this direct acknowledgement of his unique position. Indeed, the Queen's expression softened marginally. My advisors informed me that your original deployment rotation would have ended 2 weeks ago. You were scheduled to return to Earth. The realization struck Kale with unexpected force. In the intensity of recent events, he had completely lost track of his original timeline. The thought of returning to regular EDSF duty now seemed strangely distant, as if belonging to another life. I hadn't considered it, he admitted. Your superiors have requested clarification of your status, the Queen continued. The unique nature of your position as Vath-Ealer has created what they term administrative complications. They wish to know if you intend to request extended deployment or return to standard rotation. Kale felt the weight of the question. A month ago, he had been counting days until he could return to Earth, to familiar gravity and blue skies. Now, the Guardian Spark pulsed gently against his chest, a constant reminder of the connection he had formed. He glanced at Lyriel, who watched the exchange with careful neutrality, though the spark transmitted undercurrents of concern. I believe my role here remains unfinished, Kale said finally. If both EDSF and Your Majesty approve, I would request extended deployment to continue developing the joint security protocols and... He hesitated, then added honestly, to honor the responsibilities of the title I've been given. Relief flickered through the spark. Lyriel's emotion, carefully hidden behind her composed expression, but transmitted through their connection nonetheless. The Crown approves this extension, Queen Zalara stated formally, then added with rare directness, as does Lyriel's mother. The distinction was not lost on Kale. It was perhaps the first time the Queen had explicitly separated her royal authority from her maternal role in his presence. Thank you, Your Majesty, he replied simply. Later, walking along one of the compound's exterior gardens where the 3 moons of Cerulean Prime cast their pearl-like glow across the landscape, Kale reflected on how completely his perspective had changed. What had begun as a tedious assignment on an alien world had transformed into something he could never have anticipated. A position of unique responsibility, a connection to a culture vastly different from his own, and a bond with a royal child who had shown him a courage and wisdom that transcended species differences. The Guardian Spark warmed against his chest, responding to his contemplation. It was neither fully Cerulean technology nor entirely mystical. Something in between that reflected the Cerulean integration of biology and spirituality that humans were only beginning to comprehend. In saving Princess Lyriel, Kale had not only protected a child in danger, but had unwittingly opened a door between worlds that centuries of formal diplomacy had failed to unlock. The wonderful reward he had received was not merely a title or privilege, but a place of belonging in a world where he had once felt utterly alien. As if summoned by his thoughts, he sensed Lyriel's approach before he saw her. Another aspect of their spark connection. The princess, accompanied by a single guard who maintained a respectful distance, joined him at the garden balustrade. Mother has approved my request to include Earth military history in my formal studies, she informed him with evident satisfaction. and to designate you as a primary instructor. Kale smiled. I'm not a historian or a teacher. You are Vathular Solii, Lyriel corrected with royal certainty, bearer of the dawn light. And you have practical knowledge that no academic could provide. She gazed out at the alien landscape that was her home. If I am to rule Cerulean Prime someday in a galaxy where humans are our allies, I must understand not just your treaties and trade agreements, but how you think, how you fight, why you would risk yourself for a child of another species. The insight in her statement struck Kale deeply. This young princess understood something many adult diplomats missed. That true alliance required genuine understanding beyond formal protocols. I would be honored to share what I know, he said sincerely. Lyriel made the circular gesture over her heart, then added a very human nod, a deliberate adoption of his cultural gesture that touched him more than she could know. Above them, the 3 moons of Cerulean Prime shone with ancient light upon the recovering compound. Beyond the gardens, the joint security teams continued their patrols, humans and Ceruleans working side by side with growing ease. The universe remained vast and full of dangers, but tonight, on this once alien world, Sergeant Kalen Vance stood beside a princess of another species and felt something he had never expected to find so far from Earth. He felt a home. The Guardian spark pulsed in gentle agreement, marking the beginning of a new chapter in the unexpected bond between a human soldier and the alien civilization he had come to serve.